I'm Harry Margolis, and I am your host today. Thank you for joining us. And I'm delighted that Gabrielle Clemens is with us to talk about divorce and finances. Of course, divorce might not be everyone's favorite topic, but if you're dealing with it, finance is a huge part of the topic, and I'm sure you're going to be very interested. So Gabrielle was a former family law attorney and tax attorney, and she saw the light, at least the light for her, and is now a financial planner. And but she, as a result of her background, does work with a lot of clients going through divorce, and has put it all together in her new book, Love. I guess not Love and Money, but Marriage is About Love, Divorce is About Money, and is really a guidebook for everybody to use, anybody to use going through divorce. So we're going to talk for a while about the book and about the topic, and then, some of you may have specific questions that you want answered. And so if you do have any questions, you should have a control panel on your screen, and there's a line called questions. You can click on that and type in your question. And when we are done talking about the topics we're going to discuss, I will look to those questions and present them to Gabrielle, and I'm sure she'll have great answers for all of them.
We'll see. I hope
so. So why don't we start, Gabrielle? And I thought maybe just start if you can give really an overview of the topic, of what the book's about, and your approach to dealing with these issues about all the financial issues that come up during divorces.
Fine, love to. Thank you, Harry. Thank you for having me. This is such an honor to talk to your community. So thank you. Yes, I'm Gabrielle Clemens. I have written this book. I've been in the financial services, legal, divorce industry for over 25 years, and I hate to call it an industry, but that also talks a little bit about some of the sentiment in the book, which is divorce is a business, and the series that this book is started, this is the first book in the series called The Business of Divorce. And the first step as you're looking at this book is to really understand that we take a little bit of a different approach. We take an approach to the before, the during, and the after the divorce process, and what people need to know on the whole at different parts of the process, what you need to prepare for, what you need to understand, and at least ask your attorney, ask your accountant, ask your financial advisor these questions. I wrote the book because I felt as though there wasn't a resource available that handled the full, realm of the divorce process. Everything from choosing an attorney to following up with Harry and his team on how to reconstruct your estate planning once your divorce is over. So the book is really written for both men and women. And it's also written for, the country. So there are words in there that we don't necessarily always say financial statement. In some states, we use the words, financial affidavit, and certain, everything is governed by state law. And so it's designed to be open to everybody and easily readable. So it's written in a tone that's very, very matter of fact, sort of if you came in and met with me and we discussed some of these things, it's very approachable and it's a very stressful.
And also note that it has a lot of worksheets, so help people work through some of these issues.
It does. It has worksheets. It has pro tips. It has little scenarios that you might recognize yourself in as well. So if you'd like, you can download it, or you can pick up a copy. But basically, the book is written for those who are contemplating, navigating, or recovering from the divorce process. So there are certain things that you need to understand as you contemplate the divorce or your divorce, and even if you want a divorce. A lot of people, I just spoke to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and we were getting to the bottom of what her sense or her expectation that a divorce would provide her that she doesn't have now. She was in her 70s. Her husband was in his 80s, and we just had a really rich conversation around, you know, where are you going with this and why? And is there something that maybe could be fixed? Sometimes I recommend that people just live apart for a while before, you know, before filing or starting that process, because once it begins, you can turn back, you can turn the whole process off, but it becomes a little bit more difficult.
So you're not just a lawyer and a financial planner, you're also a therapist?
Well, yes, not clinically, but that's the first step in the chapter. The first step is to get a therapist and start putting your team together. A critical point that I'm sure anyone knows who has paid an attorney by the hour, especially family law attorney, do not treat your family law attorney as a therapist. They're too expensive. They're not qualified.
That'll cost
and,
you.
you know, there are specialties out there. There are people out there that really want to do that and help you that way. But maybe your family law attorney isn't that person. But basically, put your team together. You know, talk to your friends and your family and get a sense of who the right fit, who the right attorney would be for you, and also look at the right process for you. If you think you can go through mediation, or what is arbitration, you know, I hear from a lot of people that I haven't worked with from the beginning, and they said, I never realized we could have done mediation. I realized I could get a private judge and go through arbitration, which is so popular in California and other jurisdictions. So it was a way to get the information out there at different times, pick it up when you're ready to read about a certain thing that you might have a question about, put it down, go through your process, come back to it when you're at a different stage in your process, and you can glean information that might pertain to you as well, or at least give you the questions to ask in one place. But so the first part is before the divorce, and you know, looking at this, approaching this as a business. You know, divorce should be, once we all wrap our heads around it, that you are actually facing this process, it should be about the future. And it's not about avenging the past. It's not about, you know, trying to get someone back for any wrong that they did to you. And it's, you know, it's very emotional, as you can expect. It deals with your family, your finances, and your future. And it's something that, you know, you have to approach, if possible, with a clear head, an emotional heart, and understand that this is a business. And one of my other favorite topics or comments in the book is the person you're divorcing is not the person you married. So things have changed and the dynamic has changed. And so people have to understand that if you've seen your spouse in a business setting, that's what you're going to get here. That's the person you can expect. So if you've ever bought a car with your spouse, that's how they're going to treat this process. It's, you know, they say, well, I won't take the blue car if all they have is yellow, but I can get it by Friday, I'll take the yellow car. Or they beat the salesman down until, you know, the last bottom dollar. So you know your spouse the best. And for people who are considering divorce, just think about what you can do ahead of time to truly prepare yourself and your family for what may be coming next. So that's the first. The second part.
A question occurs to me on that first part.
Go ahead.
So, should people be like setting up separate bank accounts and moving money ahead of time?
Well, they don't necessarily need to move money. You don't want to do anything that you're going to regret later. I mean, if these are marital assets, 50% of it is yours, and you can. You don't want to do anything that, you know, you're doing for an improper purpose. You know, part of this process is to take inventory of the marital estate, what are the marital assets, what are the marital liabilities. If you want to open up a new credit card, that might be a good idea. Start tracking expenses that way. You don't want to change any of your beneficiaries on your life insurance policy, your IRA account, your 401ks, anything financial. You really want to stay status quo until your attorney can figure everything out, put everything on a sheet of paper, figure out what's in the marital estate, and then proceed depending on your circumstances.
But you want to make sure you have some access to cash, I assume.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
You want to absolutely make sure that you have access to cash, make sure that you have access to credit, which is why, you want to make sure you have a credit card in your name, because oftentimes, you face the credit cards, your access has been terminated and you're left without. Eventually, and this is just fast forwarding for a minute because I want to remember to tell you this, you want to get your own cell phone plan. I know everybody likes to be on a family plan.
Right.
But that includes tracking, that includes, seeing who you're calling, who's calling you, who you're texting, and can become very messy and give access to someone that you may not want to have access to your, who you're corresponding with. So the cell phone contract, just get a new phone, you can keep your number, but just move it off of their plan if you're on their plan. So, yep, it's, you don't want to do anything that is going to appear to be fraudulent or, with malintent. So you want to stay the road. And then as you're going through the middle of the book, which is, as you're going through the divorce, it's keeping a budget, getting control of your finances, understanding your cash flow, and really thinking about your future. In the book, I tell you, I recommend that you start building a vision board. And it's think of the future and think of what you're looking forward to by perhaps being in your own home. You don't have to keep the marital home, and a lot of people want to, or think that's, that's important, and maybe it is to you, and that's fine. But for people who are thinking, well, I always wanted to live in Back Bay. Maybe I could rent a place there. I always wanted to live down the Cape. Maybe I could do that. Start building your post-divorce lifestyle in a way that you want. You don't have to negotiate with anybody. You don't have to convince anybody. It's just your vision of the future that once this is over, this process, which is a temporary process, that, I'm going to have, this is that life I'm going to build. And what that does, Harry, is that lets people see what the future is and then step back. And when they're looking at a proposal, or they're looking at, the dining room set that, that they desperately want, but they're thinking, well, gee, if I'm going to move to Cape Cod and be in a little Cape house, then maybe, maybe that's not going to be the right fit for me. And you start to see things and envision your future in terms of your present, and you can negotiate better, and you can be beyond what these material
figure out what matters and what doesn't matter.
Exactly. Because what can happen is you get so stuck in this process that you just can't see the forest through the trees, and you end up with there's a vignette in the book about a woman who knew her husband wanted the boat, and so she said she wanted the boat. So finally, she bought him out of his equity in the boat, and then realized she couldn't even afford the boat. This is kind of Ted Lasso, right? Anyone who watches Ted Lasso, it's it kind of goes with the team, what Rebecca was doing for the team. But anyway, it's it's something that you want to keep in mind, what's going to be important, and think about the attorney dollars that you're spending when you're fighting over, in the book there is something about the good knife, and it's probably not the best thing to use, but it's or the antique car or something. I mean, how much are you going to spend on these items that ultimately you're either going to sell to a third party, or aren't worth the attorney's dollars that you're spending on fighting for them? And you might want to talk to your therapist about what that all means. But
how you can let go if the other side's being unreasonable.
Exactly. And how just give it to them if it's something that you can't replace. If you can maybe make new memories with a new painting or oriental rug. Or I had somebody fighting over the piano one time, and she was moving into an 800 square foot apartment, and she was going to have to, it was a big grand piano.
Put it in storage.
And she was going to put it into storage. And, and so we worked it out, and she ended up selling it. She got it, but she sold it. So really keeping in mind those types of things and remembering that this is a business. You're paying a lot of people to help you through this process.
Mhm.
And if you have children, you're going to have a relationship with your former spouse for a long time. And what does that look like, and what do you want that to be? Because
Yeah.
you can make or break it through this process.
Right.
So that's critical. And then the last part of the book is moving forward. It's, tying up all loose ends. You've been to court. You're standing in court. The judge asks you if you've had counsel. Maybe your attorney is there. And after the judge drops the gavel, attorney A goes back to her office, attorney B goes back to their office, and you're left, and your ex goes off, and they're in their separate direction, and you're there. And what do? I highly recommend you make plans for the evening of that time, maybe evening, maybe over the weekend, go somewhere, start your new life, get your head around what's happening next. And when you come back after a few days, think about initiating the quadro, qualified domestic relations order that splits qualified assets. Think about, updating your, visit Harry and his team and update your new will. You need a trust if you have non-retirement assets. Think about a trust. Think of who your beneficiaries are now, and really start to move forward in the process of your post-divorce life, for yourself. So that's tying everything up.
So going back to the quadro that you mentioned, so that's for retirement plans, IRAs or 401k plans, right?
Correct.
And the idea is normally you can't transfer them or split them without being a taxable event, unless you do it through a quadro.
Yeah, a quadro is a qualified domestic relations order. So qualified plans are protected. 403Bs, 401Ks. They are. The lights are going out here. I'm not moving enough. These are qualified plans that are protected by the federal laws of ERISA. So if you're a creditor, a typical creditor of someone's, you can't just go in and demand to, take possession of their 401k. They're protected from creditors. So in the divorce process, you can access the funds of your spouse, or the qualified funds of your spouse, but you have to go through the process of a QDRO, Qualified Domestic Relations Order. Justin Kelsey's firm has it, Lisa Ehrman has it. So there are practitioners who do just, have that specialty. You have to go to a specialist. It costs between $400, $500, $600. It can take 4 or 5 months to get this through the courts and back and forth to the plan administrator. So you're going to court, you're getting a court order to demand that the plan administrator separate the protected assets, the qualified plan, the 401k. And that process involved, it gets, we could talk about that for an hour. But anyway, so ultimately those assets are then rolled over to your IRA. But one important thing to know, if anybody here is interested in taking money out of that quadro, that 401k, you can roll it out and not pay a 10% penalty if you're younger than 59 and a half. So that's a really nice way. You won't pay income tax, but you won't pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty if you're younger than 59.
If you do it as part of the quadro, or do it, interesting.
Well, the quadro's done, but then now you have an account at a 401k at a company that you don't work for. So typically you roll the 401k assets out into an IRA, but before that transfer happens, you can take funds out of that. You'll pay income tax on it, but you won't pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty. If you're under 59 and a half, you won't pay that penalty if you're over 59 and a half. You can get
anyway, right.
But you won't pay income tax on it.
So do you have any rule of thumb in terms of retirement plans, whether people should take them or not take them as part of the divorce, or is it just every case is different?
Well, every case is different because it depends on their need to access, cash, their liquidity needs. It depends on what the other assets look like. So it really depends. In Massachusetts, typically, we equalize the retirement assets and then we equalize the non-retirement assets. So we don't mix apples to apples or we tax affect them, which means we apply a tax rate to those plans, those dollars of assets.
So you discount it in the calculation. Yeah.
Because a dollar of non-retirement, a dollar of, of cash is not the same as a dollar in a retirement plan, because you got to pay tax when it comes out.
Yeah. And another question about that, but I forget what it is. So I'll ask another different question. So, are there any kind of special traps for the unwary, things that kind of mistakes that divorcing couples often make?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I would really look at your spouses, if you can, before the divorce, maybe as you're contemplating, get a copy of their credit report. See maybe you both get credit reports. You really should be checking that on an annual basis anyway, and get copies of the credit reports, see what credit cards are out there, and really have an understanding of your debt. So two big traps, or not traps, maybe debt is a trap, but pets and debts also always give us the most fun, if you will, because people will fight tooth and nail over the dog or the cat, and debts are always a surprise. I mean, I was reviewing a life insurance policy with a client the other day, and unbeknownst to him, there was a loan against the cash value in the policy that if we had that exercise, we just wouldn't have known. We would see the cash value as 200,000. It was supposed to be 400. There was a $200,000 loan. Nobody's looking, underneath the, underneath the hood to see the kinds of those kinds of transactions. So you're not going to see it on a tax return necessarily. You're not going to see that. And also that goes for a 401k, your spouse's 401k. If there's a loan against it, make sure that they haven't just taken a loan, put those assets aside, and now they've reduced a $500,000 401k to $250,000 by taking the other 250 and and putting it somewhere, because unless you keep track of these numbers, you'd never know. So that's something to be wary of and to watch for what you don't see. The credit card's very important, and the same thing with the HELOC. Oftentimes when people are going through divorce, they access, they have a need for cash, and they access the home equity line of credit. And if you're not watching that balance, because all of a sudden the mortgage statements and the bank statements are being redirected to a post office box, you're not going to see them, and you could miss that. And if you're keeping the house, that could be a surprise. And we want to eliminate surprises in divorce, and that's one way to do it.
Definitely. So I remember my other question was, you mentioned that in Massachusetts, things generally get split 50-50. But that's true of a long-term marriage, right? Not necessarily of a shorter-term marriage.
Well, again, it depends. And one of the first pages of the book says it depends. Everyone's different. You can't make blanket statements.
You sound like a lawyer when you say it depends.
That's when I put my lawyer hat on. Yeah, it really depends. So we don't like to make broad general statements, but in particular, we look at the marital assets. So we take inventory of the marital assets. And to the extent that they were both contributed to, one, because you have equity in the house, a home that you may have bought a few years ago, maybe you have equity in it, that's considered a marital asset. And we equalize that with other assets as well. So typically we look at the retirement assets separately from the non-retirement assets, again, for liquidity purposes, because you're going to need some cash to move if you haven't already done so. But depends on where the assets come from. Separate property is, even in Massachusetts, all property is considered marital, but in other jurisdictions, separate property is truly separate. And it depends on the length of marriage. If you just married and you have assets that were yours from beforehand, I mean, if that's happening to anyone, or you have children who may be getting married, make sure you have a prenup. All of this could be avoided, or some of it could be avoided if you have a good postnuptial agreement. So that's something to think about as well. But
so you recommend that everybody have a prenup, no matter how old they are when they get married?
everyone needs a prenup, especially if you're older when you get married.
Yeah.
Because you may have some assets, and your spouse may have other children, and you may have children, and it gets very messy once the first of you were to passes away, and what are the rights of the the current spouse, what are the rights of the your children, and if you're going to get married in the later years, just make sure you update your beneficiaries. That's an important thing. Oftentimes former wives get, or former spouses I should say, get a windfall when because somebody didn't remember that there was a life insurance policy or an old 401k or something that still had their name on it. So
yeah,
certainly things to think about. But yes, everyone needs a prenup. That's my other one.
So even a younger couple that really don't have any assets when they're getting married?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, I believe that they need that because if nothing else, it's an exit strategy for, this is what we're coming into, this is what we have, or this is what we expect. So you can state whatever inheritances that you may, that you may anticipate that you are going to be the beneficiary of an irrevocable trust, or even a revocable trust that can be modified. So you want to at least have that discussion. And I think it's a really healthy discussion, especially with the divorce rates, what they are today. And so many of these young kids have seen what their parents have gone through, or their friends' parents have gone through, financial devastation, or the financial, just the downgrading of the status of their lifestyle because they didn't structure things the way that they could have or should have. So, protecting yourself, especially in light of today's day and age, we really need those wrappers around our finances and our futures.
Okay, good. And so what special considerations are there if the couple has a child with special needs?
Yeah, that's a great question. I deal with that a lot because, the courts can only do so much. They can, a child is emancipated at age 23, and they can recommend, or, the attorneys will come together typically and recommend a special needs trust that is funded. I have a client out in another part of the country that has a child who will never be emancipated, lives with her, and she doesn't get any assistance from her former spouse. And it's just a situation that you can't really, it's not really enforceable in a divorce agreement. But again, you can structure an agreement that at least puts you both on the same page as to what's going to happen. I mean, she had to put in 2 weeks of respite into the agreement just to make sure that she got 2 weeks off, so that she could, live her life too, because you're just tied to the home. But special needs trust is critical in those situations, and deal with it now. If you're going to sell the house, maybe you put some money aside for that. Certainly check with your office around, what kind of state and federal benefits would be available, and depending on the age of the child, child support. There in Massachusetts, there are child support guidelines that are calculated, but we can deviate from those in the event that there are special needs. It only goes so far. So
and we often recommend buying life insurance to fund those trusts.
Absolutely, yes, for at the time that you pass, absolutely. So it's really important because I'm seeing it more and more often just around the country. It's absolutely critical to take care of those kids. I'm not sure how much you can actually factor into a divorce agreement.
Yeah, I think you could at least do the life insurance. Yeah. So.
Oh, the life insurance, sure.
Yeah. And So does everybody getting divorced, should they have both a divorce attorney and a financial planner?
Well, they should. They should. Depending on how complex the divorce is and how complicated the financials are. I mean, the nice thing is for the attorneys, we can certainly, certified divorce financial analysts can support the litigation. We can run the numbers. We can, present different scenarios. We can offer up our, opinions based on capital gains and, or those, an income flow, a cash flow from maybe current portfolios that would subsidize just a support order, so that we look at things a little bit differently than do. So we can offer solutions. We can be very valuable in the process. As I describe in the book, what CDFAs do as opposed to divorce coaches. And, especially if you have a mediator, if you are facing mediation and if you're participating in that process and you're not going to the mediation session with an attorney, definitely have a conversation with an attorney before you go. Have a conversation with your financial advisor if you're going to be facing asset division, just to get a sense of sort of what should I be asking for, what should I know. What should I agree? You're not going to agree to anything until you speak to your attorney, but just to sort of get a lay of the land about what the different components of your marital estate look like and how best to divide them.
Yeah, because you never know what you don't know.
Exactly. You don't know what questions. And my book does suggest a lot of questions around what to ask, how to hire a mediator, what to ask a mediator, and when to bring in an attorney as well. So you should always have an attorney on the side. I mean, that's just, even if you're in mediation, don't go at it alone. One of the biggest issues that I see is people getting on the other side of their divorce. They've gone through it. They're done. They've stopped paying all the attorneys. And then they read the agreement with a clear head, and they're
surprised.
shocked.
Yeah,
Surprised. Yeah. And you don't want that. You don't want that regret. You may not like your agreement. You probably won't like your agreement, but at least you'll understand it. That's
right. Just know what you're getting into.
Yeah. Exactly.
So how do you work with clients who are in a divorce setting?
Yeah, so I provide support to the attorneys. I help, I work with clients together as well. I work with the two spouses together to come up with an agreeable financial division of assets. We look at the child support guidelines. A lot of people who are paying child support or alimony, they have funding questions. So, how can I not take this out of my cash flow? How can I make this work? How is this going to impact my future? How am I going to bounce back from this, from my retirement planning? A lot of questions when I work together with clients or just with one of them is, can I afford to keep the house? Do I want the Cape house? Do I, what can I afford to pay for college for the kids? So that's something that, we run those numbers and come up with a doable, sustainable plan to actually be able to feel comfortable with the proposal or the settlement that you're signing. So we do this at the proposal stage. So if you have a proposal before you agree or disagree, we stress test it and look at sort of what we could improve and what makes sense, and just run the numbers so that there are no surprises when this is all over.
Sounds good. So those were my questions. Anything that we haven't covered that you think we should cover?
I would just like for everyone to really think about divorce as a new beginning, as opposed to, the ending of a relationship, and really put on your business hat, think about these things, these issues clearly. Don't expect anything more from your spouse than they would have treated any other business dealings. I think you won't be disappointed if you treat it that way. If you be reasonable in the types of things that you want from the home, and if it is an important oriental rug or chair or set of books, then I think remembering that and putting that out there, and seeing what you can trade for that, but don't get too deeply committed to the point that it's doing damage, and you're spending a lot of time and money on these things, especially if it can be replaced. I would just like for people to create a vision board. Think about what you want your life to look like. Definitely make arrangements for where you're going to go for the weekend. After your divorce is over, go visit a friend, drive to the Cape. I don't care what you do. Do something for yourself and start building an environment and a lifestyle for you and your kids if you have children, and make this a positive change. It doesn't need to be negative. It doesn't have to define you, and it doesn't need to be a prolonged issue. I know people continue the post-divorce litigation long after you walk out of the courthouse that day, but there's nothing you can do about that. If it's a modifiable agreement, then they're going to come back to modify, but hopefully you'll have gone forward in your emotional and psychological state to see it for what it is and live your best life.
So that sounds like great advice, whether you're getting divorced or not.
Yeah, true.
Right. So I only see, if I'm reading this, looking at this right, one question.
Okay.
So if anyone has questions, please type them into the panel that should be on your screen. But the one question is a reminder of the name of the book, which is important.
Marriage
Marriage is about love, divorce is about money, and by Gabrielle Clemens, and you get it on Amazon.
Amazon, that's right. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, barnesandnoble.com.
Okay.
It'll be in the bookstores this summer. And and I also have a website, GabrielleClemens.com. I'll be putting the book tour and appearances and things like that. And I'm happy to come and talk to your group.
Sounds great. So I hope I'm not missing any questions, but I don't see any. So we can allow everyone to get back to their day, their afternoon. Thank you very much, Gabrielle. And if you do have questions you don't want other people to hear, contact Gabrielle directly.
Yeah, I'll give you my cell phone number. It's 781-910-4770. Give me a call if you have any questions. I'm happy to just talk to you. And if there's something that I know that'll help you, I'm happy to share that.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Gabrielle.
Thanks, Harry.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Harry.